The math behind owning a second home. Does it make sense, or should you just be vacationing? All right, Valerie, CFP with Mariner Wealth Advisors. My name is Michael MacKelvie. I'm also a CFP with Mariner Wealth Advisors. We got something important to talk about today, at least seemingly a first world problem that is a financial question on many people's minds. If you're listening to this, make sure to hit the subscribe button if you're new to the channel. But this question comes up a lot. And the way that I hear it phrased is not necessarily, hey, should I buy this home or not? It's, hey, I'm actually thinking about Arizona, especially in February here in Seattle, or March, whatever it might be in the spring or winter when they maybe haven't seen that big ball of gas up in the sky for a few months. I would like to consider getting maybe a second home in Arizona. I've been thinking about this for a while. That's a lot of times how I hear it framed.
I totally agree. It's generally a result of an emotional, knee-jerk almost type of thing that, oh, this has to happen.
Right.
Or they're thinking, and then there's the justifications as to why this needs to happen. I'm throwing away money on vacations, and so I should invest it. Yes, there is a litany of things that come up when the second home conversation comes into the picture.
Yeah, and it's it's really this question of does it make sense, or should we essentially not do it and keep vacationing? Can definitely understand the allure of it, but let's get one thing straight here just to start. When we're talking about a second home, not an investment property, but a second home, that is a toy. That is a very expensive toy. And I'd be willing to go to bat with just about anyone on this, but I'm going to break it down in a second. The reason is when you remove income from real estate, it is a lousy investment unless we expect unrealistic, abnormal returns over the future. Okay. So the only way that real estate would make sense without the income is if you somehow placed into your assumptions an unrealistic growth rate, which we've been spoiled by in recent years, which I think has caused a little bit more of this craze to buy second homes. So I do want to get that straight. I'm going to go over why that is, as far as why this is more of a second, kind of a toy. But I do think, to kind of counter that, most people aren't necessarily thinking about, hey, we just want to have this as, cabin just for us. I think a lot of times it starts as, well, we could rent it out for part of the year. We could rent it out maybe for 6 of the months that we're not going to be there. So it's a lot of people that are kind of caught in between. They're viewing it maybe a little bit as an investment property and a little bit as a second home. But I did want to make that distinguishing point. If it's truly a second home, it's more of a toy, which I'm going to cover here in a second. But is it okay if I maybe just touch on the different loans? Because the loans do impact, the finances here, as far as, what is classified as a second home and what's classified as an investment property. The loans options that you would have significantly impact this decision. Is it okay if I touch on that real quick, Valerie?
Yes, I give you permission.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate the permission. I know it's a second piece to this, but I'm not a loan officer, so let's get that straight. But if you're buying a second home, typically you can get a conventional loan with as low as 10% down. Now, if there's anybody in the mortgage industry that's watching this, I know there's new programs that are coming out all the time. Feel free to comment and let me know where I'm wrong on that. That was what was just written out to me when I went down this road. 10% down conventional loan. That's the lowest you can do for a second home. When it comes to an investment property, it's typically 20% depending on the property. Okay. So that's what's been communicated to me here in the Northwest as of recently. I could be off on that because I know these programs are changing all the time. Shockingly, the lending world is trying to figure out new packages with higher interest rates to get people into second homes. So let me know if I'm off on that. But that's important because, if you're looking at, let's say, a $500,000 house, that's the difference between $50,000 and $100,000 when it comes to a down payment. Now, Valerie, let's touch on some of the benefits. What are some of the benefits to owning a second home instead of just maybe vacationing?
Yeah. So I think what clients see as their benefit is that it quote unquote forces them to go on their vacation. Sometimes I hear them say, we live a stressful life and we just don't ever make time for ourselves. But if we bought this other home, then we would be forced to go there because it would be such a shame to not see it there. So that's one of the things I hear. The other benefit is that you know that again, the money that you invested, that you put into that home is now building into something. It's an asset that you can later on sell, as opposed to, you spent $50,000 over 5 years vacationing, whereas in turn you had used that for a down payment on this house. And so it's an investment as opposed to throwing away money.
Yeah.
I guess the other reason that I've heard too is that it just makes it easier because then you know what's there, you have your stuff there, you don't have to pack. Again, all of these are absolutely luxuries.
Right.
These are just saying I have a really fun toy. None of this is saying, my life cannot be without this.
Yeah, but it's it's an understandable question, especially somebody that's worked their whole lives, and it's something that they've thought about. A lot of people, this is essentially a dream to them, and maybe sometimes it's getting that second home that you eventually move into full time. We certainly see that in Oregon and in Seattle. People buy places in the central part of the state where there's just more sunshine, or in Arizona. So when it comes to benefits, yeah, ease of use, big benefit. Hey, it's Friday. Let's just go over to Bend for the weekend. Let's just do it. You don't have to get on any app and find an availability and communicate with the host. You know where you're going. Ease of use in that way. It's also not an ease of use in other ways, which I'll get to in a second. It's a place for future generations. I know this was really important actually for my family. In the 50s, they rolled on out to Coeur d'Alene and got 2 acres of waterfront property for $50,000. They were the first family out there. Anybody that's been to Coeur d'Alene and is aware of the prices now, that is insanity. But they were the first family in Rockford Bay, literally the only cabin, and they were able to get it. This tiny, we had it up until 2007, had shag rug carpet. It was like 900 square feet, but it was a blast. It was a place really for future generations for them that they could bring the family together and create those memories, which I think you can't downplay. Another piece, potentially less than the cost of travel. So depending on how much time you're spending out there, it could be less than vacationing. So if it's truly a second home, in this case, Coeur d'Alene, my family was out there for, let's just say 3 months a year. Well, that's if it's $500 a night, $600 a night, between $50,000 and $60,000 of, what you would have to pay on something that you were renting if you rented for 3 months a year. So, that would maybe pencil out, hey, it maybe makes more sense to own if you're planning on spending that much time on the road and you just want that. The other thing from a benefit standpoint, the tax benefits. Now, I find that people tend to chase tax savings in lieu of the fundamentals. We love to chase the idea of not having to pay the government more, but that doesn't mean we should sacrifice the fundamentals here. So some of the tax savings that are a benefit, you can deduct the property taxes, potentially the mortgage interest, but this is where people, I think, are a little confused. There's a cap on mortgage interest deductions at $750,000, which was a change that occurred with the Trump tax changes that came into play. In addition to that, if your state has a, let's just say state income tax, you're probably hitting the SALT tax maximum of $10,000. So the property taxes you might not be able to actually deduct, depending on what state you're in and the different, variables that would go into that for your own personal situation. So I find that the tax thing is sometimes overblown, but it can be a benefit. Now, if it's an investment property, that would be business expenses, which you could deduct against the business income, which in this case would be rent. So if you're maybe spending some of the time there, there's this 14-day rule that's important. You could be getting some of that money back against the rental income that you're getting if it's a investment property. But I do find that people tend to blow a little bit out of proportion the benefits of the taxes when it comes to a second home, Valerie.
Yeah, I feel like all of that is chasing pennies to try and make yourself feel better about the,
We're
thousands and hundreds of thousands.
narratives.
Yeah.
We-
And so, yeah, you can make yourself feel better that way, but admit to that.
yeah, we are wonderful at crafting narratives for things that we want, right? It's a good point. So the downsides now, so I mentioned cost. Well, cost can be a
Hmm.
benefit, I guess, if you're going to be vacationing 3 to 4 months a year, but that again is a luxury. I believe in every continent. Uh,
Yeah.
Cost. Okay, so down payment, you obviously have to shell that money out. Property taxes, insurance, all of these costs that are associated with owning a second home when you could maybe just be renting or vacationing for the weeks that you want to vacation. When I typically run this out for a client, it's rare that it makes financial sense for them. If it's a true second home, it is rare that it makes financial sense unless they are going to be living in that home again for several months a year. And they're saying, hey, we're going to pause all other vacations, but it's rare that it makes sense. So again, cost, you really should be thinking of this as an added cost, which brings in the other piece to this. And again, we're speaking if you don't plan on renting this out, risk. So when you own a
Hmm.
second house, it's, you should look back into the Zillow history of the house. It's like clockwork. Somebody buys it maybe in like 2006. I had fun looking at this in Bend for 600,000. Somebody sells it. That same property owner sold it in 2010 for 400,000. We forget that was just about a decade ago that people were selling their second home properties at several $100,000 losses, right? We know that vacation spots tend to swing more with
Hmm.
the ups and the downs. So you're taking on an idiosyncratic, singular risk. That piece of property is owned in a single town, in a single state, right? So you can't necessarily diversify the home. There is significant risk here. And yes, believe it or not, real estate can go down. Okay.
And to add to the risk piece, often I hear I want to buy in Colorado or Florida, i.e., I want to buy in the mountains or at the ocean. Well, guess what? Snow can be pretty damaging, can cause a lot of stress on a house,
Yeah,
as can ocean winds or hurricanes or tornadoes, or not tornadoes so much. But, generally, these are places that the weather is absolutely beautiful, but it's also absolutely brutal on these properties. And so the maintenance can be really high and difficult. Plus, there's just, insurances that you're probably not going to be facing in other parts of the country.
definitely. Yeah. So, um, you know, you might also feel like you have to use this home. So
Right.
I think that's another piece of it. Like you feel like you got to use it. People say the same thing about like, different assets that they acquire. Like for example, a boat, or they maybe, purchase a motorhome and you're looking at it and you're like, I feel like I got to use it. Um,
Yeah. And sometimes I've noticed too that they say, well, I have to use it. Or they're saying they went into it and saying, I absolutely want to buy this beach house. It's the thing I've always wanted to do.
right.
And then a week later, they've bought a mountain home. And so
Yeah.
what you think you absolutely cannot live without seems to change. And then you don't have the flexibility. Whereas if you were vacationing, absolutely, you can travel the world, you can do whatever you want, and you're not locked into anything.
Yeah, I mean, I very much tend to lean towards keeping flexibility is actually the optimal solution here. But I
Hmm.
totally recognize that families that have worked extremely hard and they have a fair amount of money and they have the ability to do this want to cultivate that experience for their family, create a family home destination, and they have the ability to do it. So, they're very much considering it, even though they're aware that there's a financial risk to it. I just find it, kind of, it's misleading to maybe think of this like, hey, this is truly a good investment decision. It is very rare that that is the case. Again, unless we assume that you're going to be renting it out for a significant portion of the year, which I feel like people, when they buy a second home, I don't know about you, but if you've experienced this with clients, they start doing that and they maybe have like one experience or it just doesn't go like they thought it would. And they say, you know what, we're just not going to do that anymore. They maybe allow
Right.
friends
Yeah.
and family to stay there for a few days a year, but that's about it. So it's
And they're
truly
not going
not.
to charge their friends or family. And then, if they're wanting to rent it out, they want to use it during the best times of the year.
Yeah.
And so no one's really going to rent it while it is snowing in the Outer
seasonal
Banks.
locations. Yeah.
Right. And so, and to your point, when you said effectively, when you put this into a financial plan, it does not improve the financial plan.
No. Unless we're
that's
throwing
okay.
in crazy assumptions, right? Yeah.
Right. And I guess that's the thing, is that it's okay that this decision doesn't necessarily improve your financial plan, but you still, that's what money was for. It was to spend it and to live as you see fit. If it's going to bankrupt you and you're going to be out of, on the cat food diet at 70, let's not do it. But otherwise, I would say, it's okay. Just admit it to yourself that you're spending on a luxury, but you've earned it. And nobody's judging you, and you can have a lot of fun with it, and it's great, but don't, try and sugarcoat it either.
I just think, a lot of times people are buying them, maybe for the wrong reasons. Like literally to sound maybe a little bit better at a cocktail party. So I would just, I would hesitate to advise somebody to make that big of a decision just to, get that little bump. I know as a society, we have an obsession with home ownership. But again, being able to have the flexibility to just travel wherever you want, to me, I think that's optimal. But I can understand where if you have the luxury to have the money, you maybe consider this as a really shiny toy that you want to provide for your family. So in conclusion here, Valerie, assume that this won't make financial sense. The question, of course, is if you're looking into this deeply, how big of a financial commitment is this going to be? Are you truly calculating all the correct opportunity costs to this? Are you thinking about all the variables? I find that few people do when they get to this decision. They tend to just think mortgage costs this much. I can maybe get this much in rent. Sure, I can do that. There's more to it than that. Okay. So hopefully you guys found this video helpful. Again, my name is Michael MacKelvie, joined by Valerie Escobar. We're certified financial planners with Mariner Wealth Advisors. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't. You guys take care.
Mariner Wealth Advisors, or MWA, is an SEC-registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Kansas. Registration of an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. MWA is in compliance with the current notice filing requirements imposed upon registered investment advisors by those states in which MWA maintains clients. MWA may only transact business in those states in which it is notice filed or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from notice filing requirements. Any subsequent direct communication by MWA with a prospective client shall be conducted by a representative that is either registered or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from registration in the state where the prospective client resides. For additional information about MWA, including fees and services, please contact MWA or refer to the Investment Advisor Public Disclosure website at www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money. The views expressed in this podcast is for educational purposes only and do not take into account any individual personal, financial, legal, or tax considerations. As such, the information contained herein is not intended to be personal, legal, investment, or tax advice. Nothing herein should be relied upon as such, and there is no guarantee that any claims made will come to pass. The opinions are based on information and sources of information deemed to be reliable, but Mariner Wealth Advisors does not warrant the accuracy of the information. Asset allocation diversification is a strategy designed to manage risk, but it cannot ensure a profit or protect against a loss in a declining market. Certified Financial Planner, trademark, CFP, registered trademark, and federally registered CFP with flame design marks, collectively the CFP registered marks, are professional certification marks granted in the United States by Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards, Inc., also CFP Board. The CFP registered trademark certification is a voluntary certification. No federal or state law or regulation requires financial planners to hold the CFP certification.